Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm continuing the process of turning my Animal Crossing villagers from New Horizons into human versions of themselves. And I'm also sharing the process of how I made each of their artworks. If you missed last week's video, there will be a link in the iCard above, and there will also be a playlist on the end screen of this video so you can check out the other characters that I made as well. So next up is actually a really popular character, Stitches. So Stitches is the only lazy villager on my island, and he's pretty unique looking because he's actually designed to look like a stuffed toy. And within the Animal Crossing community, I would say he's pretty popular, really sought after. I see him a lot in everyone's sort of dreamy list whenever they're trying to find villagers, whenever they're villager hunting. And he was actually the third villager that I met on another island. So Stitches is actually a really cute character. He always talks about how he has these bugs in his floor and that they whisper to him and they tell him things, and it just seems like they're sort of friends. And he also has a really big thing for food. A lot of times he may talk about snacks, or he may talk about how he smelled something good coming from someone's house. Maybe they were cooking or something like that. He also, to me, seems to be pretty young. I think out of all of the characters that I've done so far, I would peg him to be the youngest. I think everyone else is probably in their early 20s, except for Fuchsia. I kind of picture her to be maybe in her mid to late 20s, but I always thought of Stitches maybe to be the youngest, maybe around 19 or 20 or so. But anyway, he just comes off as very playful, very obviously youthful and naive. He just basically doesn't want to work, and he's a lazy villager. He just wants to lounge around and eat snacks all day, which I think is pretty relatable, and honestly what I would like to be doing most of the time as well. So we have a lot in common. As far as his design goes, he's relatively simple. I think the only thing about him is just that he has multiple colors over his body, and he is basically just wearing a tank top with stars on it. And so I try to incorporate all of those things into his human version, and I just wanted to make sure that it looked like him. So as far as the sketching process goes, I did the first one on the left a while back when I first had this idea of sort of doing this series. And originally I wanted to keep Stitch's face somewhere on the design. I knew a lot of people, I've seen a lot of fan art of other artists who basically gave him a beanie or gave him a hat that had the ears and the face on it. So I kind of wanted to play with that idea a bit too. Originally in this one, he was wearing a hoodie and eating a cookie. You can tell he looks very young, and right next to him there's kind of a pose I thought of. Maybe he just woke up and kind of rubbing his eyes a little bit, he's a little sleepy. And then moving on to the second sketch, I just wanted to refine it a little bit more and try to kind of get a little bit of personality for him. And originally you can see in that second sketch that I was going to give him sweats. I really wanted to stick to the sort of comfy looking clothes for him. Obviously he's lazy, so I kind of figured anything that would be, a little too time consuming in a way. I thought maybe putting on pants for him would be like this, exhausting process or whatever. He's just he wants something sort of quick and easy. So I opted out of the sweatpants in the final design. Moving on to the third sketch, the one on the left, I came up with the pose relatively early on. I knew I wanted to do the sort of airplane running animation type thing that the characters do in the game sometimes. So that was just trying to imagine what that would look like. And then you can see I take it a step further on the right hand side, and I actually bring out my bodycoon model, which I'll end up showing you guys later on. But again, it's just more about practicing the pose and just playing with a few ideas. But for the most part, I kind of had a set idea of where I wanted this to go. And here we move on to the first digital sketch that I did. I don't really take any of my traditional sketches and transfer them in and draw over them. Sometimes I will, but not with this one. But you can see whenever I am just drawing from imagination, especially when it comes to the full figure, it's still very awkward looking and stiff. There were a lot of things I hadn't considered until I actually broke out my reference. And here we can see a big change. I just think it looks a little more natural. And here I'm just referencing my bodycoon model, and I'll put up pictures right now of what the actual models look like. Whenever I was posing the bodycoon models, I actually had them in different positions when I took pictures just to kind of get a variety. I wanted to make sure that the pose was somewhat dynamic. And here I have the refined sketch. It does take me a little bit to get to this point, and if you can tell, I'm trying to make the refined sketch as detailed as possible, because when it comes to the line art process, I find that if you want a specific look, more so on the maybe like the comic book side to things, I think the more details you have within the character and in the clothes that they're wearing in the background, the better. You don't necessarily have to go all out on those things, but I find that the more detail that you have at this point, it'll be easier to do the line art, and I feel like it brings everything together. And as far as references go, I didn't really use too many. The only references I really had were for his beanie, but I didn't feel the need to show a picture of that to you guys. But after my original sketch, I did notice that he looked a lot like Jude from 16, if you guys remember that cartoon. I think it was on Cartoon Network, or it might have been Nickelodeon. I just thought that was kind of a funny thing. But anyway, you guys, that's it for the sketching phase. So let's just go ahead and jump into the line art. And as far as the line art goes, I don't really do anything all too special. And if you guys are new, or if this is your first time watching this series, then let me go ahead and explain that I am in fact tracing the background and all of the furniture along with it. I originally wasn't going to include a background within this series, it was just going to be the characters, but at the very last minute, when it came to Dom's picture, the very first one that I did of this series, I decided to add a background, and ever since then I just wanted to keep all of the pictures consistent, so I just go ahead and trace the background, and you can see there that I have to move a few elements closer into the frame, that way they all fit and you can tell what's going on. But I really think the background adds a lot. I try to decorate each character's house to match their personality and what they like. My main goal with this series was really to redesign the characters and not really focus so much on the background, so that's why I feel okay tracing it. And I will mention that for this serving cart right here, I actually had to look up a reference for it because part of the object was actually blocked off by that lantern that you see in the video. So I had to quickly, Google a picture of what it actually looks like and try to figure out how it's supposed to, come together and get the perspective correct and everything like that. One little thing that I do want to kind of point out, and I kind of thought this was really cute, like I said before, Stitches has a tendency to talk about the bugs that live in his house, and mostly they're like underneath the floorboards or something like that. And I remember when I played the first bug off within the game, and you get a whole bunch of cool prizes and stuff, and some of those prizes were actually fake bugs. They were like these little plastic toy bugs within the game. And I never really knew what you were supposed to do with them. I mean, I wasn't sure how you would go about decorating with them. They just seemed kind of weird. I didn't want to sell them though, because I kind of figured the bug off was something really special. And as it turns out, I actually found a use for them. I decided to decorate Stitch's patio with them. I thought this would be kind of a really cool, reference to how lazy villagers talk about bugs a lot. And, he's there on his porch with his little grill and all the food, and the bugs are just, playing with him, I suppose. So that's just something I wanted to point out. So if you're struggling to figure out what to do with those bugs like I was, then there you go. I gave you an idea. But after the base colors are laid down, I go directly into shading, and I had originally started to shade the skin in first. Normally I start with the character, and I usually feel comfortable doing the skin, but for whatever reason I was having a little bit of trouble when it came to Stitches and his just shading his skin. I'm not really sure why, but I just found that the colors I was picking just made him look really red, and I played around with it for a good while, and I tried and I tried. Eventually I was just getting frustrated with how the skin was turning out, so I just stopped completely and moved on to his hat. I thought maybe moving on to a simpler section of the drawing and shading that in first, and then kind of working around that would help me understand how I need to be shading his skin later on. So I went ahead and, like I said, I did the hat and moved on to his clothes next and all of that. You can see that in the beginning, his shirt kind of has this weird yellow tint to it, and that's just because of the base color. I eventually change it to be a brighter white color, and then I have to change the shading that I did to a sort of blue, bluish gray, like a cool gray kind of color to match. I think this looked, 10 times better than that yellow looking shirt. Although I think with Stitches it probably would have been fitting if his shirt was yellow. It just means, he's lazy and doesn't feel like washing it or whatever, but I don't want him to be that gross, so we just gave him a white shirt. And then eventually I move on to his shorts, and originally I wanted them to be like these, really comfy blue kind of shorts, but for whatever reason, again, I was just having trouble shading and it just wasn't coming together. I then decided that I wanted to change the blue color into maybe a black, just to kind of, I guess, simplify the shading. I just felt like the blue color just really wasn't working for whatever reason, and I just thought the black might look a bit nicer, especially since he's so colorful to begin with. I think having that really solid piece of color within his clothes really brings out the other, colorful articles of clothing that he has, his shirt, his socks, and the hat, of course. And then finally I go back and I'm recoloring the skin. I'm trying to get it to look, nicer than what it originally did look like. It turned out 10 times better than my original. You'll see me use a lot of the cut and grad techniques, specifically on his biceps. I like doing this with muscle because I feel like it defines the form or contours, if you will, I guess. Just ever so slightly. You have to be careful with it because if you go overboard, it can kind of make it look a little funny. And something I experimented with was giving him lips. Normally, whenever I would give character lips, I would do it in the line art phase, but I do find that sometimes they can look a bit too big, or I don't know, especially on men, it can look a bit odd, almost like they're wearing lipstick. So I decided to just not line the lips and then, do that in the coloring process. And here we're just moving on to the furniture. I don't really think there's a whole lot to say about it, other than the fact that I really love how most of this furniture came out. I think the pool looks very much like the pool in the game. It has that sort of plastic feel, and it has, the really nice reflections. Even the grill as well, or I guess it's a barbecue or whatever, but I felt like I shaded it and I gave it so much, I suppose, depth, and even adding like the highlights to it, and even going so far as to add the flame underneath the grill, the charcoal. It really gave it a whole nother layer of just, I don't know, awesomeness, for lack of a better word. And I even, do a little extra thing where I add some smoke onto the barbecue to make it look like it's actually cooking and everything. Like, I went all out on this drawing. I was just having fun with it, really. I was kind of worried that I wasn't going to get this video done on time because of the holiday season. I did end up having to work an extra day, which kind of cut into my time for working on this drawing. But in the end, I kind of pushed through it, and it all came together eventually. So after the furniture is all shaded, I go in and add these blocks of color and just make different shapes in order to simulate stone. I just do it very roughly, and then I go back and I refine it a bit. And I do have to play with the perspective once I'm done, just to get it to match the perspective of the picture. So after that's done, I go and start shading the house. Again, there really isn't too much to talk about. I think the hardest part was definitely the roof. There was just so many peaks and valleys of it, things that are raised, things that are recessed, and that adds for a lot of highlights and shadows and everything. So it definitely took me some time to go in and select the pieces that I needed to shade. And something I've been doing with the house, normally I would just do very basic solid shading. I wouldn't really add any sort of transition colors or any sort of softer shading. But I found that with Tutu's drawing that I did in the previous video, I added some softer shadows to the house, and it just kind of gave it this extra, this extra thing that I really enjoyed. And one thing I forgot to mention was when it came to coloring in the hedges, I actually was playing around with some of the brushes in Sai. And within Sai, you can actually create your own brushes. I won't get too much into it, but basically there's a texture that you can use for your canvas that's a leaf texture. And I actually repurposed that texture to be a brush setting, I suppose. I don't know how else to describe it, but you'll see once I start shading the hedges that this new brush I created has more of a randomness and is very sporadic as to where the color is going to be placed. And this is even better when it comes to having a pressure sensitive tablet, because it can make thick and thin lines, and then those lines can have different types of randomness to them, so it feels a little more natural. And that's actually something I wanted at the very beginning when I was trying to shade in the hedges from the very first image that I've done, and it just never quite came together in that way. But now I feel like it's very much where I want it to be. And probably my least favorite part of this whole picture, or just any picture that I've done with the Animal Crossing series, is this vertical paneling that I have to do. I normally just draw the horizontal lines first, just to kind of get the rough idea, and then I have to go back and do vertical lines that are within the perspective, and then I have to go in each individual layer. It's all on one layer, but I have to go in and kind of break up the pattern a little bit so it's not so uniform and it looks a little more natural and like wood paneling. And finally, in the home stretch of things, I just need to add some cast shadows to the ground. Basically how I do this is I take the furniture layer with all of the color and I duplicate it, and preserving the opacity, so I just color in what's already been colored. I'll take my shadow color, fill everything in, and then put it behind the original colors that I have. And then using the transformation tool, I kind of warp it into the position I need it to be, keeping in mind where the sun might be and where the cast shadows might fall. And I'll do this with the furniture, I'll do this with Stitches himself, and I'll add a little extra depth to the shadows as well, just because I feel like they kind of get lost within the wood paneling. And the very last thing I have to do, the very last two things I have to do, are make the little speech bubble for Stitches. And of course, like I talked about earlier, I wanted him to be talking about the bugs and how excited he is that they're out to play with him. And he's just out there having a good time. So like with the other characters, they all have their signature sort of catchphrase. And Stitch's catchphrase, of course, is stuffin', which obviously references that he looks like a plush animal and, they're made of stuffing. So that's just what it is. And after that, the very last thing to do is just to sign it and we can call it done. I don't know about you guys, but I do feel like every new artwork I'm putting out, I am slowly getting better. I feel like I say that in every video, but I do feel that a lot. I strive to give you guys, the best quality that I can, and even though I'm not a professional or anything like that, I'll definitely do my best to give you a entertaining video, which is probably why I'm doing the audio this way. It may be a little bit different from my previous videos, but I thought this might be a little more natural rather than reading from a script like I normally do. So we'll see how this video plays out, and if I feel like it's not quite as good as the other ones, I may just go back to the old format. But I'm always, willing to try different things for the sake of, better videos. Anyway, now I'm rambling. So if you'd like to see the high-res version of this artwork, there will be a link below in my DeviantArt page, so you guys can go check it out. And if you want to keep up with what I'm doing, or if you just want to chat, consider following me on Instagram. I'd love to see you guys there. Anyway, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys! Thank you so much for watching. I post new art videos every other Wednesday, so consider subscribing to the channel by clicking my logo on the screen or the subscribe button down below. If you'd like to further support this channel and me, you can buy me a Ko-fi in the link below, and anyone who donates gets a shout out at the end of my videos. Thanks, guys!